You know that specific kind of silence that hits you right after a funeral, that heavy, suffocating quiet where the only thing louder than the ringing in your ears is the beating of your own exhausted heart? I was swimming in that silence, driving back into Tucson at 2 a.m., my eyes burning from crying and 3 days of hospital coffee, my dad's crumpled obituary still sitting in the cup holder next to a lukewarm energy drink, just trying to get home to the one place where I felt safe. I turned onto Coyote Creek Drive, my headlights cutting through the pitch-black desert night, expecting to see the familiar silhouette of the ranch house I'd inherited from my grandmother, a sturdy brick sanctuary built in the 60s that smelled like sage and memories. But when my high beams hit the corner lot, my brain just stopped working, like a computer blue screening, because where my house was supposed to be, where I had grown up playing in the yard, where I had just installed 50 grand worth of solar equipment, there was nothing but a jagged, smoking pile of pulverized concrete, twisted rebar, and broken dreams. And standing right there in the middle of my driveway, illuminated by the harsh glow of my headlights like a villain in a noir film, was Karenza Sterling, the president of the Oak Haven Heights HOA, wearing a pristine cream-colored power suit and silver Gucci pumps that cost more than my first car, tapping a gold pin against a clipboard with a look on her face that wasn't just indifferent, it was satisfied. I stepped out of my truck, the smell of diesel fuel and crushed drywall hitting me like a physical punch, the dust coating my tongue, and I just stared at her, my mind unable to process the violence of the scene, while she looked at her watch and gave me this tight, pitying smile that didn't reach her dead eyes. "Elias, honey," she said, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness that Southern grandmothers use right before they destroy your reputation. "Emergency demolition, structural safety hazard. I'm sure you understand. We couldn't risk the community's property values with that eyesore standing another day." She thought she had won. She thought she was talking to a broken man, a grieving son, a nobody solar installer who would just roll over and take the insurance check. But Karenza made one fatal, catastrophic calculation error that night. She didn't know that the high-end security drone I had installed in the mesquite tree in my neighbor's yard, the one I set up because of porch pirates, wasn't just recording to a hard drive. It was live-streaming every single second of her illegal demolition party directly to the Pima County Sheriff's cloud servers. But before we get to the part where her life implodes, let me back up and tell you how a disagreement over solar panels turned into a federal racketeering case. My name is Elias Thorne, 47 years old, former Navy engineer, and for the last year and a half, the owner of a vintage 1962 ranch house in Oak Haven Heights, a neighborhood that used to be quiet until Karenza turned it into her personal fiefdom. I had spent months retrofitting Grandma's place with a massive solar array, top-tier SunVault batteries, the works, cutting my electric bill to zero in the Arizona heat, which is basically a superpower out here. The trouble started the day Karenza clicked her way up my driveway, the sound of her heels on the pavement sounding like a ticking clock. She handed me a violation notice on paper so thick it felt like cardstock, informing me that my solar panels were aesthetically dissonant with the neighborhood's visual integrity. "I have permits," I told her, wiping grease off my hands. "City of Tucson, fully approved, legal and binding." "The city doesn't care about our property values, Mr. Thorne," she sniffed, looking at my house like it was a stain on her silk blouse. "The HOA covenants are clear, and I suggest you learn to respect the hierarchy here." Most HOA presidents are annoying, maybe a little power-hungry, but Karenza was different. She was a predator, a shark in a blazer, and over the next few weeks, the letters kept coming. Fines for $50, then $100, then threats of liens. I tried to play nice. I went to the meetings in the stuffy community center that smelled of floor wax and despair, where I watched her belittle old ladies and shut down anyone who asked about the budget. It was my neighbor, Silas Vance, a retired federal prosecutor who spent his days tending to his cactus garden and smoking cigars, who pulled me aside one night. Silas had eyes that had seen everything, the kind of guy who didn't speak often, but when he did, you listened. "Son," he told me, pointing his cigar at Karenza's shiny Mercedes G-Wagon as she drove by. "That woman is playing a game, and you're not looking at the board. Look at the pattern." He was right, because when I started digging, I found out that the Miller family 3 doors down had sold their house to Karenza's real estate firm, Sterling Luxury Properties, for pennies on the dollar after getting hit with thousands in fines for a non-compliant fence. Same thing happened to Mrs. Higgins, a widow whose overgrown rose bushes forced her into foreclosure, right into Karenza's waiting portfolio. But then my dad got the diagnosis, pancreatic cancer, stage 4, and the world stopped. I had to fly to Chicago to be with him for the end, and I knew I'd be gone for a week, maybe 2. I told Silas to keep an eye on the place, set my security drone to active, and got on a plane, my heart breaking in slow motion. 3 days later, while I was sitting in a hospital room listening to the hum of life support machines, Silas called me, his voice shaking with rage. "Elias, you need to listen to me," he said. "She's here. Karenza is here with a city official named Greg Pendergast, and they just slapped a condemnation order on your front door, claiming your solar installation caused catastrophic electrical instability." "That's impossible," I whispered, pacing the hallway. "It's a lie." "It doesn't matter if it's a lie, son. They've given you 72 hours to demolish or the city does it for you," Silas hissed. "And since you're in Chicago, they know you can't stop them." I tried everything. Injunctions, phone calls, begging, but it was a Friday before a holiday weekend, and the bureaucracy was a wall I couldn't climb. My dad passed away on Sunday morning, and while I was holding his cold hand, saying my final goodbye, my phone buzzed with a notification from my drone, motion-detected driveway. I opened the app and watched in horror, helpless, thousands of miles away, as a bulldozer roared to life in my front yard at 6 a.m. on a Sunday. I watched Karenza point at my living room, directing the crew like a conductor of destruction, and the audio feed was crystal clear. "Rip out the copper first," she told the foreman. Greg signed off on it. "Just make sure the solar panels end up in my truck, not the dumpster." She wasn't just demolishing my home, she was looting it. She stripped the place of value, flattened 60 years of history, and left me with a pile of rubble to come home to. So there I was, standing in the headlights, staring at the woman who had bulldozed my life while I buried my father, and she had the nerve to offer me a settlement right then and there. "I know this is hard," she purred, pulling a document from her clipboard, "but Sterling Properties is willing to take this lot off your hands. Clean up the mess. Say $40,000? It's generous, considering the blight." I looked at her. Then I looked at the drone camera blinking silently in the palm tree above her head, a tiny red eye of justice in the dark. "I'm going to destroy you," I said, my voice quiet, terrifyingly calm. She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "Honey, I am the HOA, I am the city, and you're just a sad little man with a pile of dirt." "We'll see," I said, and walked past her to stand in the ruins of my grandmother's kitchen. Most people would have broken. Honestly, most people would have taken the check and run, but grief does strange things to a man. It hollows you out and fills the space with cold, hard resolve. I checked into a Motel 6, down the road, set up my laptop on the stained duvet, and called Silas. 20 minutes later, Silas walked in carrying a banker's box of files and a bottle of expensive whiskey, followed closely by Felix Chun, a young kid from the neighborhood who was an absolute wizard with data forensics and had a personal vendetta against Karenza ever since she fined him for working on his server racks in his own garage. "We have a problem," Silas said, skipping the pleasantries. "Or rather, she has a problem, and it's going to send her to federal prison if we play this right." We turned the motel room into a command center, maps taped to the mirrors, timelines drawn on the back of pizza boxes. Felix pulled the drone footage and started syncing it with public records. And that's when we found the smoking gun, or rather, the smoking dust. See, my grandmother's house had the original 1962 vinyl flooring in the kitchen, beautiful retro green tiles that I had planned to restore, but those tiles contained asbestos. Under federal law, you need a specialized hazmat team to remove them, sealed bags, negative pressure, the whole 9 yards. I zoomed in on the footage. "Look at that." I pointed, my fingers shaking slightly. There was Karenza's budget demolition crew, guys in t-shirts and jeans, smashing those tiles with sledgehammers, clouds of toxic dust billowing into the air, drifting into the neighbors' yards, coating the kids' swing sets next door. They were shoveling federal environmental violations into a standard dumpster. "That's a RICO predicate," Silas whispered, his eyes gleaming. "That's not just a code violation, Elias. That's knowing endangerment of public health, illegal disposal of hazardous materials, and wire fraud." But Karenza wasn't done digging her grave. The next day, she started her smear campaign. I went to the grocery store to buy toothpaste, and Mrs. Higgins cornered me in the produce aisle, looking terrified. "Elias," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "Karenza sent an email blast to the whole community. She says you're unstable, that you have PTSD from the Navy and you destroyed your own house in a fit of rage. She says we shouldn't approach you." I felt the blood drain from my face. She was weaponizing my service, my mental health, trying to isolate me so no one would believe the truth. It was vile, it was low, and it was exactly the mistake she needed to make to get the media involved. I called Elena Rossi at Channel 8. She had been trying to nail the Tucson Planning Department for corruption for years, but never had a hook. "I have drone footage of the HOA president bribing a city official, stealing solar panels, and dumping asbestos in a family neighborhood," I told her voicemail. She called me back in 30 seconds. While Elena was setting up her sting, Felix struck gold. He hacked into the metadata of the city permits Greg Pendergast had signed. They were backdated. The demolition order was created 2 hours after the bulldozers arrived. And then, the piece de resistance. Felix found the financial connection. Karenza hadn't filed a conflict of interest form in 5 years. She was voting on fines, forcing foreclosures, and then buying the properties through a shell company registered to her maiden name. We had her. We had her on everything. But she was cornered, and cornered animals bite. That night, a brick came crashing through my motel window. Wrapped around it was a note. "Leave town, or the CR is next." I called the police, but I also called the EPA. I got Agent Monica Graves on the line, a woman whose reputation for crushing polluters was legendary. When I sent her the clip of the asbestos dust cloud drifting toward the neighborhood elementary school, I could practically hear her loading her weapon through the phone. "Don't touch anything," Agent Graves said, her voice like cold steel. "I'm deploying a hazmat response team. If she tries to move that debris, she's committing a felony in real time." The next morning, I drove to the site. Karenza was there with a cleanup crew, not a hazmat team, just some guys with a truck, trying to hide the evidence. She saw me and marched over, her face a mask of fury. "You think you're smart?" she hissed, getting right in my face. "I own this town. Greg Pendergast will have you arrested for trespassing on my work site. You're a pathetic, broken little man and nobody cares about your sob story." "Actually," I said, pointing behind her, "I think they care." She turned around just as 3 black SUVs with federal plates screeched to a halt, followed by a massive EPA mobile command unit and Elena Rossi's news van. Agent Graves stepped out, wearing a windbreaker that said Federal Agent in big yellow letters. "Stop all work immediately," she shouted, her voice amplified by a bullhorn. "This is a federal crime scene." Karenza faltered, her arrogance slipping for a split second. "Excuse me? I am the HOA president. I authorized this remediation." "You authorized the illegal release of a Class A carcinogen," Agent Graves replied, walking past her like she didn't exist, "and we're seizing the dumpster." That's when Karenza made the phone call that sealed her fate. She pulled out her phone, thinking she was out of earshot, and dialed Greg Pendergast. "Greg, fix this now," she screamed, unaware that Elena's boom mic was picking up every word. "I paid you 10 grand for that fast-track permit. You earn it. Get these feds off my back." The color drained from her face as she realized the camera red light was on. She had just confessed to bribery on the evening news. But the real show was just beginning. We weren't just going to arrest her. We were going to dismantle her entire empire in front of the people she had tormented. The emergency city council meeting 3 days later was less of a government proceeding and more of a gladiatorial arena. The room was packed. Over 200 residents of Oakhaven Heights squeezed into a space meant for 50, people spilling out into the hallway, watching on monitors. The air was thick with the smell of cheap coffee and revolution. Karenza walked in flanked by 2 high-priced lawyers, looking exhausted but defiant, still clinging to her clipboard like a shield. She thought this was a debate. She thought she could spin her way out of it with talk of community standards and veteran instability. When the council chairman gave me the floor, I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just plugged in my laptop and projected the timeline Felix and I had built. "This isn't about one house," I said into the microphone, my voice echoing in the silence. "This is about a system designed to steal." I played the tapes. the audio of her ordering the copper theft, the video of the asbestos cloud, the spreadsheet showing $340,000 in profit she made from forcing neighbors out of their homes. I saw Mrs. Higgins weeping in the front row, clutching a photo of her late husband. I saw the Miller family holding hands, looking vindicated for the first time in years. Karenza stood up, her composure finally shattering. "This is a witch hunt," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "That man is mentally ill. He's a danger to our children. I did everything to protect your property values." "Ms. Sterling," a voice cut through the chaos. It was Agent Graves, stepping out from the back of the room, followed by 2 FBI agents and a U.S. Marshal. The silence that fell over that room was heavy, absolute, and terrifying. "Karenza Sterling," Agent Graves said, holding up a warrant. "You are under arrest for racketeering, wire fraud, bribery of a public official, and violations of the Clean Air Act." As the agents moved in, the flashbulbs from the press went off like strobe lights, capturing the moment the silver handcuffs clicked around her wrists. She looked at the crowd, searching for an ally, for someone to save her, but all she saw were the faces of the people she had bullied, fined, and robbed. "You can't do this," she screamed as they let her out. "I know the mayor. I know the judges. The mayor is currently giving a statement to the FBI about you," Agent Graves said calmly, guiding her out the door. The applause started slowly, one person, then another, until the whole room was standing, a roaring ovation not just for me, but for the end of the reign of terror. The fallout was swift and brutal. Karenza pled guilty to avoid a 20-year sentence. She got 5 years in federal prison, restitution of $1.2 million, and a lifetime ban from holding any position of trust. Greg Pendergast rolled on her instantly to save his own skin and is currently serving 3 years for corruption. But the money, that was the best part. The court seized Sterling Luxury Properties assets. We got it all back. Mrs. Higgins got her deed restored. The Millers got their fines refunded with interest. As for me, I rebuilt. Oh, did I rebuild? 6 months later, I stood in my new kitchen. It was modern, open, and flooded with light. I had installed an even bigger solar array, a system so advanced it now powers the streetlights for the entire block as a donation to the city. I looked out the window to the community park across the street, the one Karenza had let fall into disrepair. It was blooming now. We used the leftover settlement money to build a community garden. I saw Silas walking his dog, waving at Felix, who was helping Mrs. Higgins set up a new iPad. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a home in a neighborhood that had finally learned that the only way to stop a bully is to stand together. There's a question people ask me a lot in the comments. Was it worth it? Was the stress, the brick through the window, the destruction of my father's memory worth the fight? Some people say I should have just taken the money and moved on. That vengeance is a poison. But looking at Mrs. Higgins laughing in her garden, looking at the solar panels glistening on every roof in Oak Haven Heights, because we fired the old board and rewrote the rules to encourage green energy. I think justice isn't about punishment. It's about restoration. It's about making sure that the people who think they can bulldoze the little guy learn that sometimes the rubble you leave behind is the foundation for something stronger than you could ever imagine. So what do you guys think? Does a corrupt system deserve to be burned to the ground? Or is there a better way? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice served cold. I'm Elias Thorne, and I'm finally home.